Today's pressure is feeling stuck, even when your calendar is full. Your team is busy, right? The programs are running, but you still just sense that something is off. Here's what might be going on. Your church's values are no longer aligned to your mission, or maybe they never were to begin with. Let's talk about how values can cause churches and people to stall. Now, this may sound a little bit harsh. I don't mean it that way, but it's unfortunately true in a lot of churches. Lots of churches have values that sound nice, but they don't really do anything. Words like excellence and integrity, community, they're good words, they're fine words, but they don't really move people. And that is our mission, right? Discipleship, which is about movement, spiritual movement. So if you were called, to lead a ministry, you probably didn't feel like you wanted to lead one that's just safe. I mean, you were called to lead a movement, the kind that God can use to change lives. And that means your values need to demand action. There really should be an alignment between the passion of the calling and the values that we adopt. If your church feels stuck, your values actually might be the hidden hand that is holding you back. I've been in ministry for 20 years now. I was a lead pastor for 13 years. Over the last 4 years, I have coached pastors and consulted with churches to help them primarily add more intention to their mission. We're always dealing with pressures and alleviating pressure. And the way we typically do that is by better strategies, more intentionality. My point is this. I've seen a lot of churches, and a lot of ministry models. I've seen a lot of values, a lot of norms, lots of behaviors, and all of those things is what kind of creates a church culture. I've seen some amazing churches with incredible momentum. I've also seen some, without it. Having the right values is not the only answer to missional success and momentum, but I can say this with a high degree of certainty. It plays a very important part, and it might be one of the more important things that we just don't pay attention to. I've been thinking about this for a long time. I've been putting off this podcast and this content for a long time because I wanted to get it right, and you know how this is. Sometimes, this perfectionism is the enemy of good and done. So here it is. If I were starting a church today, I have kind of come up with 8 values that I would begin our church with. And they're really bold values. They're not things like excellence, although that should be a given. 8 bold values that if I were starting a church today, I think would give us the best shot at momentum, at life change, at real discipleship, disciples who make disciples. That's what I would want to do. So here are the 8 values. You may not agree with any of them, but at least for me, I think they would work. Number 1, we'll do whatever it takes to overpopulate heaven. I love that phrase, overpopulate heaven. So I have really embraced that in my ministry and in my coaching and consulting. We're going to overpopulate heaven, and we're going to do whatever it takes to do that. That would be our value. Some description here, evangelism, right? Evangelism isn't optional. It's the point, right? The Great Commission reaches back to the lost and supports the spiritual growth of the found. So we really can't be a discipleship-oriented church if we're not reaching the lost. And so on some level, we're going to do whatever it takes, short of sin, to reach people and overpopulate heaven. That's the first value. Second value, the resurrection sets our every direction. Now, it rhymes, I do like that, but the resurrection is what's going to set our every direction. The resurrection, right, is the event that drives everything, period, right? I would center everything we do around the reality of the resurrection. Let me just give you an example. For instance, I'd ensure that no message was preached that could be true without the resurrection, right? If a message could be true without the resurrection, it's not a church message. That's a motivational speech, not a sermon. Be great for a leadership conference, but we're a church. So we're going to only teach things that are true and helpful because of the resurrection. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to teach on the resurrection every week. I don't mean that. But we are going to teach the gospel every week, and we're going to bring it back to Jesus every single week. Number three, third value, we are going to be loyal to the mission and the movement. Our loyalty is going to be to the mission and to movement. Comfort does not get a vote in my new church. The mission always wins. And here's the issue. We can't be loyal to everything. Something's got to be at the top of the priority. Now, of course, Jesus is at the top. But being loyal to Jesus means being loyal to the mission of his church, right? So this means that we choose to move the mission forward no matter what. If a staff member or a volunteer is hampering our mission, then they've got to be removed. If a program is in the way, it has to be killed, right? We're going to be loyal to one thing and one thing only, the mission. And the mission is about movement. That's where we're going to place our focus. Any obstacles, they have to be removed. Number four, nothing but the gospel is sacred. This is kind of similar to three, but there's a little important difference here. Nothing but the gospel is sacred. No sacred cows in my church, except for Jesus and the gospel. The message is unchanging. Everything else is temporary. I mean literally everything else, right? No program or event is sacred. Nothing is going to remain except the gospel. So if something isn't working, we're getting rid of it. If something is working, but it's keeping something else more important from working better, we're getting rid of it. Again, our loyalty to the mission is going to drive that nothing but the gospel is sacred. And I think that value is worth its own value because churches so easily get ensnared by this is how we've always done it, and we don't want to hurt people's feelings. Well, people are the point, and we're going to get to that next, but the mission is where we're loyal. So that's four, nothing but the gospel is sacred. All right, let's go through the next four, last four. Number five, my fifth value. People are the point, and progress is the purpose. Okay, discipleship is a journey. I haven't written what my new mission statement would be if I were starting a church. I'm starting with values. I think my mission statement would be, we exist to make disciples who make disciples. Because that word discipleship, I broaden it all the way through evangelism and moving forward. So for me, that word is way broader than maybe we have traditionally thought about it here in our local churches. But discipleship is a journey, right? Growth is the measure. So I would structure every single thing in the church to move people forward along a discipleship journey. Everything would be about movement. Progress, right? Progress with and through people is the point of pastoral leadership. So yeah, we would focus on people, but we wouldn't be okay with focusing on people if they're not making progress. And pace isn't the issue. Progress is the issue. They may go really incrementally slow, and that's okay. But we are not going to just focus on people. We're going to focus on the progress that people are making. And corporately, organizationally, we're going to structure our ministry model to do just that. Number six, this is a fun one. We're going to have conservative theology, but liberal ministry. I could do an hour on this. But these are short podcasts, so I'm not going to do that. But maybe one day I'll break this down more. There is a difference between theology and ministry. Okay, theology sets this kind of ideal destination, but ministry is how we work with a person from where they are in the direction of that destination. This makes kind of theology relatively easy, to be honest. Ministry is the hard part. This is why, listen, I have 2 seminary degrees, so nothing against seminary, but this is part of the issue with seminary. In seminaries, we have professors who are not practitioners talking about theology and how you should practice it in ministry, but they're not doing it. And they're not the same thing. Theology is pretty easy. Setting the missional target, that's pretty easy. But ministry, that's really hard. We've got to figure out in ministry, how do we meet every person where they are and lovingly inspire and equip them towards God's ideal? When a church kind of neglects what's real, people lose hope in God's ideal. So we can't neglect what's real. We can't pretend that People aren't walking in broken and hurting from different places. I think this is a huge, huge topic that's worthy of a lot more conversation. I mean, just for a second, some of our more conservative pastors have called out, they've called out other pastors, and this is what those other pastors are doing. Those other pastors that you may be calling out, they actually have pretty conservative theology, but they are living in the real world with real people who are really far from God's ideal. You know, ministry is moving those people incrementally and spiritually closer to Christ likeness over time. That's what ministry is. Let me give you, sorry, I got to give you one quick example. And we'll deal with a really difficult one. Let's deal with like an LGBTQ issue. If a person who's 15 in your student ministry says to their small group leader, or maybe to you as a pastor, that they are struggling and working through same-sex attraction, how you minister to that person is dramatically different than a 40-year-old person who is gay, who's legally married by the state, and they have now adopted 2 children, and they are attending your church. Those 2 conversations are dramatically different. Now, is God's ideal theologically different? Probably not, right? However, how you pastor these 2 individuals from where they are towards the direction of that ideal, dramatically different. Pastors and churches who are trying to do that are taking arrows today. But what they're really doing is trying to figure out ministry for people. And I would make that one of our values. All right, number 7, here we go. A little easier. Truth and grace in full. Truth and grace in full. We get this from Jesus, right? He came to be, he's full of grace and truth, not the balance of, but the fullness of both. I would say it this way. We're not going to pull punches, but we're also not going to throw punches. The truth has never been more necessary, I think, or desired, really. But truth without grace is just legalism. On the other hand, grace without truth really offers counterfeit hope. So we want to be as full as we can of both. All right, last one, number 8, my last value if I were starting a church. I would design with men in mind. I would really work hard to reach men. Because if you reach men, you reach everybody, including the entire family and the community. On the surface, even as I wrote this, as I wrote that one, design with men in mind, as I wrote that value out, I thought that sounds a little misogynistic. And on the surface, it kind of does, but just stay with me for a minute. Men are the most challenging group to engage at a local church. They also are primarily the primary leader in the home and in the community. And in no way am I taking away anything from women. In fact, in most churches, without the women, we wouldn't have a church because women are doing all the stuff. But the reason they're doing all the stuff is because we've allowed men to stay disengaged on the sideline, or even more so at home on the sofa. So I don't want to take anything away from the work and the ability and the capability of women. I would never do that. I also know for sure that capturing the heart of a woman or a mother doesn't mean you get the whole family. So focusing on men really matters. I would do that in everything we do. I would try to add in a healthy way, focus the worship more towards men, focus our content more towards men, and not like with silly games and stupid stuff, but with really heartfelt challenge, with calling people out, by looking men in the eyes and having hard conversations. That's what I would do. Now, when you think about those 8 values for a minute, these values, I feel like, create urgency. They clarify decisions that you're going to make. And what I like the most is that they keep things moving towards the mission, not just drifting away from it. So again, these values that if I were starting a church today, which I'm not, maybe one day I will, but these values, they're really about behaviors and inspiring and equipping people to passionately pursue something. Excellence should be a given. Integrity, even more of a given. Those 8, they're not givens, but they would move things forward. Here's what I'd love for you to think about doing this week. I'd like for you to take a look at your current values. And maybe they're not written down, or maybe they are, but what's written on the wall is not happening down the hall. So take a look at them and maybe ask this question. Are they inspiring action or are they just affirming aspirational ideals? Are they shaping a movement or are you just maintaining a museum? And maybe even ask your staff, do these values actually show up in our meetings, our decisions, our ministries? I mean, if not, it might be time for a culture reset. Because, and I really believe this, the most strategic thing you can do this month might be redefining what you value. If you need help with that, that is what I do for a living. But even if you go it alone, don't settle for values that don't move the mission.